LGBT history dates back to the first recorded instances of same-sex love and sexuality of ancient civilizations, involving the history of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT peoples and cultures around the world. What survives after many centuries of persecution resulting in shame, suppression, and secrecy has only in more recent decades been pursued and interwoven into more mainstream historical narratives. In 1994, the annual observance of LGBT History Month began in the United States, and it has since been picked up in other countries.
Every February, we celebrate LGBT+ History Month. We celebrate individuals and movements that struggled, campaigned, and marched to secure for us a more equal society. We look back on how far we have come and how much further there is still to go. We remind ourselves of those hard-fought battles, the strife and struggle that those before us and those still campaigning today have had to endure. We honour the countless, often nameless activists who secured so many of the freedoms that are the cornerstone of our country today. Because of them, because of the courage and the hope they displayed, and continue to display, we no longer live in a country of Section 28. We no longer live in a country where love cannot equal marriage, where healthcare, jobs and services can be denied, where the very value of a person's life and safety were questioned under the law. Because of them, we live in a country where children will grow up learning of different families, where our health system is working to support our trans community, where our NHS became the first in the UK to provide PrEP, and where we fight to tackle hate crime together, and a country where Pride Cymru became one of the largest prides across the UK, where outside this very building we fly the rainbow flag. Progress is never inevitable. We must always guard the ground that has been won. So this month, let's reflect on what has been a formidable combination of hope and courage, what that can achieve, and keep our sights on the Wales we can create together.
This observance involves highlighting the history of the people, LGBT rights, and related civil rights movements. It is observed during October in the United States, to include National Coming Out Day on October 11th. In the United Kingdom, it has been observed during February since 2005 to coincide with the abolition of Section 28 in 2003, which had prohibited local authorities from promoting homosexuality. A celebrated achievement in LGBT history occurred when Queen Beatrix signed a law making Netherlands the first country to legalize same-sex marriage. A lesbian is a homosexual woman or girl. The word is also used for women in relation to their sexual identity or sexual behavior, regardless of sexual orientation, or as an adjective to characterize or associate nouns with female homosexuality or same-sex attraction. The concept of lesbian to differentiate women with a shared sexual orientation evolved in the 20th century. Throughout history, women have not had the same freedom or independence as men to pursue homosexual relationships, but neither have they met the same harsh punishment as homosexual men in some societies. Instead, lesbian relationships have often been regarded as harmless, unless a participant attempts to assert privileges traditionally enjoyed by men. As a result, little in history was documented to give an accurate description of how female homosexuality was expressed. When early sexologists in the late 19th century began to categorize and describe homosexual behavior, hampered by a lack of knowledge about homosexuality or women's sexuality, they distinguished lesbians as women who did not adhere to female gender roles. They classified them as mentally ill, a designation which has been reversed since the late 20th century in the global scientific community. Women in homosexual relationships in Europe and the United States responded to the discrimination and repression either by hiding their personal lives, or accepting the label of outcast and creating a subculture and identity. Following World War II, during a period of social repression when governments actively persecuted homosexuals, women developed networks to socialize with and educate each other. Gaining greater economic and social freedom allowed them to determine how they could form relationships and families. With second-wave feminism and the growth of scholarship in women's history and sexuality in the late 20th century, the definition of lesbian broadened, leading to debate about the term's use. While research by Lisa M. Diamond identified sexual desire as the core component for defining lesbians, 7a, some women who engage in same-sex sexual activity may reject not only identifying as lesbians but as bisexual as well. Other women's self-identification as lesbian may not align with their sexual orientation or sexual behavior. Sexual identity is not necessarily the same as one's sexual orientation or sexual behavior, due to various reasons, such as the fear of identifying their sexual orientation in a homophobic setting. Portrayals of lesbians in the media suggest that society at large has been simultaneously intrigued and threatened by women who challenge feminine gender roles, as well as fascinated and appalled with women who are romantically involved with other women. Women who adopt a lesbian identity share experiences that form an outlook similar to an ethnic identity. As homosexuals, they are unified by the heterosexist discrimination and potential rejection they face from their families, friends, and others as a result of homophobia. As women, they face concerns separate from men. Lesbians may encounter distinct physical or mental health concerns arising from discrimination, prejudice, and minority stress. Political conditions and social attitudes also affect the formation of lesbian relationships and families in the open. Gay is a term that primarily refers to a homosexual person or the trait of being homosexual. The term originally meant carefree, cheerful, or bright and showy. While scant usage referring to male homosexuality dates to the late 19th century, that meaning became increasingly common by the mid-20th century. In modern English, gay has come to be used as an adjective and as a noun, referring to the community, practices and cultures associated with homosexuality. In the 1960s, gay became the word favored by homosexual men to describe their sexual orientation. By the end of the 20th century and beginning of the 21st century, the word gay was recommended by major LGBT groups and style guides to describe people attracted to members of the same sex, although it is more commonly used to refer specifically to men. At about the same time, a new, pejorative use became prevalent in some parts of the world. Among younger speakers, the word has a meaning ranging from derision, example, equivalent to rubbish or stupid, to a lighthearted mockery or ridicule, example, equivalent to weak, unmanly, or lame. The extent to which these usages still retain connotations of homosexuality has been debated and harshly criticized. The word gay arrived in English during the 12th century from Old French guy, most likely deriving ultimately from a Germanic source. In English, the word's primary meaning was joyful, carefree, bright and showy, and the word was very commonly used with this meaning in speech and literature. For example, the optimistic 1890s are still often referred to as the gay 90s. The title of the 1938 French ballet Gaieté Parisienne, Parisian Gaiety, which became the 1941 Warner Brothers movie, also illustrates this connotation. It was apparently not until the 20th century that the word began to be used to mean specifically homosexual, although it had earlier acquired sexual connotations. The derived abstract noun gaiety remains largely free of sexual connotations and has, in the past, been used in the names of places of entertainment, such as the Gaiety Theatre in Dublin. The word may have started to acquire associations of immorality as early as the 14th century, but had certainly acquired them by the 17th. By the late 17th century, it had acquired the specific meaning of addicted to pleasures and dissipations, 11, an extension of its primary meaning of carefree implying uninhibited by moral constraints. A gay woman was a prostitute, gay man womanizer, and a gay house brothel. An example is a letter read to a London court in 1885 during the prosecution of brothel madam and procuress Mary Jeffreys that had been written by a girl while enslaved inside of a French brothel. I write to tell you it is a gay house. Some captains came in the other night, and the mistress wanted us to sleep with them. The use of gay to mean homosexual was often an extension of its application to prostitution. A gay boy was a young man or boy serving male clients. Similarly, a gay cat was a young male apprentice to an older hobo and commonly exchanging sex and other services for protection and tutelage. The application to homosexuality was also an extension of the word's sexualized connotation of carefree and uninhibited, which implied a willingness to disregard conventional or respectable sexual mores. Such usage, documented as early as the 1920s, was likely present before the 20th century, although it was initially more commonly used to imply heterosexually unconstrained lifestyles, as in the once common phrase gay Lothario, or in the title of the book and film The Gay Falcon, 1941, which concerns a womanizing detective whose first name is Gay. Similarly, Fred Gilbert G.E.H. McDermott's music hall song of the 1880s, Charlie Dilke Upset the Milk, Master Dilke Upset the Milk, when taking it home to Chelsea, the papers say that Charlie's gay, rather a willful wag, referred to Sir Charles Dilke, 16, giving testimony in court in 1889. The prostitute John Salz stated, "I occasionally do odd jobs for different gay people." Well into the mid-20th century, a middle-aged bachelor could be described as gay, indicating that he was unattached and therefore free, without any implication of homosexuality. This usage could apply to women too. The British comic strip Jane, first published in the 1930s, described the adventures of Jane Gay. Far from implying homosexuality, it referred to her freewheeling lifestyle with plenty of boyfriends, while also punning on Lady Jane Grey. A passage from Gertrude Stein, Miss Fur and Miss Skeen, 1922, is possibly the first traceable published use of the word to refer to a homosexual relationship. According to Linda Wagner Martin, Favored Strangers, Gertrude Stein and Her Family, 1995, the portrait featured the sly repetition of the word gay, used with sexual intent for one of the first times in linguistic history, and Edmund Wilson, 1951, quoted by James Mello in Charmed Circle, 1974, agreed, 18, for example. They were gay, they learned little things that are things in being gay, they were quite regularly gay. Gertrude Stein, 1922. The word continued to be used with the dominant meaning of carefree, as evidenced by the title of The Gay Divorcee, 1934, a musical film about a heterosexual couple. Bringing Up Baby, 1938, was the first film to use the word gay in an apparent reference to homosexuality. In a scene in which Cary Grant's character's clothes have been sent to the cleaners, he is forced to wear a woman's feather-trimmed robe. When another character asks about his robe, he responds, "Because I just went gay." Since this was a mainstream film at a time when the use of the word to refer to cross-dressing, and, by extension, homosexuality, would still be unfamiliar to most filmgoers, the line can also be interpreted to mean, "I just decided to do something frivolous." In 1950, the earliest reference found to date for the word gay as a self-described name for homosexuals came from Alfred A. Gross, executive secretary for the George W. Henry Foundation, who said in the June 1950 issue of SIR magazine, "I have yet to meet a happy homosexual. They have a way of describing themselves as gay, but the term is a misnomer. Those who are habitués of the bars frequented by others of the kind are about the saddest people I've ever seen." By the mid-20th century, gay was well established in reference to hedonistic and uninhibited lifestyles, and its antonym straight, which had long had connotations of seriousness, respectability, and conventionality, had now acquired specific connotations of heterosexuality. In the case of gay, other connotations of frivolousness and showiness in dress, gay apparel, led to association with camp and effeminacy. This association no doubt helped the gradual narrowing in scope of the term towards its current dominant meaning, which was at first confined to subcultures. Gay was the preferred term since other terms, such as queer, were felt to be derogatory. Homosexual is perceived as excessively clinical, since the sexual orientation now commonly referred to as homosexuality was at that time a mental illness diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM. In mid-20th century Britain, where male homosexuality was illegal until the Sexual Offences Act 1967, to openly identify someone as homosexual was considered very offensive and an accusation of serious criminal activity. Additionally, none of the words describing any aspect of homosexuality were considered suitable for polite society. Consequently, A number of euphemisms were used to hint at suspected homosexuality. Examples include sporty girls and artistic boys, 26, all with the stress deliberately on the otherwise completely innocent adjective. The 1960s marked the transition in the predominant meaning of the word gay from that of carefree to the current homosexual. In the British comedy drama film Light Up the Sky, 1960, directed by Lewis Gilbert, about the antics of a British Army searchlight squad during World War II, there is a scene in the mess hut where the character played by Benny Hill proposes an after-dinner toast. He begins, "I'd like to propose." At which point a fellow diner interjects "who to," implying a proposal of marriage. The Benny Hill character responds, "Not to you for start, you ain't my type." He then adds in mock doubt, "Oh, I don't know, you're rather gay on the quiet." By 1963, a new sense of the word gay was known well enough to be used by Albert Ellis in his book The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Manhunting. Similarly, Hubert Selby Jr., in his 1964 novel Last Exit to Brooklyn, could write that a character took pride in being a homosexual by feeling intellectually and aesthetically superior to those, especially women, who weren't gay. Later examples of the original meaning of the word being used in popular culture include the theme song to the 1960 to 1966 animated TV series The Flintstones, wherein viewers are assured that they will have a gay old time. Similarly, the 1966 Herman's Hermit song No Milk Today, which became a top 10 hit in the UK and a top 40 hit in the US, included the lyric "No milk today, it was not always so, the company was gay, we'd turn night into day." In June 1967, the headline of the review of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album in the British daily newspaper The Times stated, "The Beatles revive hopes of progress in pop music with their gay new LP." The same year, the Kinks recorded David Watts, which is about a schoolmate of Ray Davies, but is named after a homosexual concert promoter they knew, with the ambiguous line "he is so gay and fancy-free" attesting to the word's double meaning at that time. As late as 1970, the first episode of The Mary Tyler Moore Show has the demonstrably straight Mary Richards' neighbor Phyllis breezily declaiming that Mary is still young and gay, but in an episode about 2 years later, Phyllis is told that her brother is gay, which is immediately understood to mean that he is homosexual.